Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes, Maryland's meeting place for real conversations. Today we're joined by Delegate Matthew Schindler, representing District 2B in Hagerstown. We come at the issues from different sides of the aisle, but with the same goal, having an honest, respectful discussion about the challenges facing our community. We dig into crime and drugs in Hagerstown, affordability for families and retirees, immigration's local impact, and proposed changes to cooperation with federal authorities under ICE. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we have a very distinguished guest tonight. We have Mathew Schindler. He's the delegate from District 2B, which is right in Hagerstown. Is that correct, Matt?
Absolutely.
Is it okay if I call you Matt?
Please do.
All right, great. So welcome to the program. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So born and raised here. This is my hometown.
Hagerstown, Maryland. You were born in Hagerstown, Maryland.
You know it. You know it. Proud son of Hagerstown, Maryland.
Can you explain to me why Hagerstown is called Hub City, please?
Absolutely. So originally we were kind of the intersection of all the railroads here. All the major railroads came through here. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, things have moved on from rail days. We still have a little bit of it, but that was the big kind of industrial mover here. That was the economic driver of the area. So that saw us kind of rise up and boom, if you will. We still are kind of a hub. You've got Interstate 81 and Interstate 70 that intersect right here in Hagerstown. So even though times changed, it's still kind of the same. We're still kind of a transportation hub, and a lot of our industry kind of revolves around transportation still to this day. So
I would say that Walmart and Amazon do believe you guys are a transportation hub. They have humongous facilities in Hagerstown. What kind of economic opportunities do they present?
It's a challenge, right? It's a job. I'd like to see higher wages here. So those jobs are, on the higher end of a warehouse wage, still not quite, a high paying wage. So, you still, if you work a full-time job at one of those facilities, you're still struggling to have a living wage, right? Especially on a single income. So, they're steady jobs and, they're here because of our proximity to the interstates really is why they've honed in on Hagerstown and our neighboring towns to the north and south.
And of course, so now Hagerstown actually has become the hub city again. It's just the hub city for the warehouses and
internet purchasing.
And internet purchasing. And as you noted, it's a little bit controversial for the reasons that you mentioned. One of the hot topics that has come up quite a bit recently is the possibility of data centers. I know one of the city council members that we've had on a couple of times talks about that pretty regularly. When it comes to the opportunities that you would like to see opened up, Hagerstown, what are they? Is it data centers? Others? What is your eye on?
For us, I think the kind of the easy picking and kind of what's starting. I'm starting to see a little bit of this is medicine, right? Education and healthcare. I think those are high-paying jobs that I think we're well positioned for. Meritus is, especially with that school of osteopathy that just opened. We're really pulling in doctors and we're starting to pull in specialists. Meritus, I know, is very invested in the area, and I don't think that has any signs of slowing down anytime soon. So we also have the university system downtown, and I think there's a lot of potential for that to grow as well. So, getting away from, I don't think we'll ever completely get away from those blue collar jobs. And there's a place for those, right? But as we look and we try to find, higher wage jobs in this area, I think those are some kind of not very drastic transitions that we could make to try to put ourselves in a position for higher paying wages here.
And those are really good points. When you talk about the healthcare opportunities, but behind Meritus is the apartments where the osteopathic students are going to be. That there's a lot of apartments there. There's got to be at least a couple hundred That you're going to bring a couple hundred med students into little old Hagerstown in Washington County. That's going to have a positive impact.
Absolutely. Not only from the expendable income, right, that brings with it, and all the other businesses are going to benefit from that, but hopefully, I think the goal from talking to Merida's leadership is certainly to try and retain as many of those medical students to become physicians in this area as they can. So if we can both attract the students and then also retain that homegrown talent, I mean, that's just a plus. You're going to get people who are invested in the community and hopefully wanting to give back as well. So I think you're going to get that side of it as well.
So Matt, that opens the door to the fact that there's a high retirement community in Hagerstown. It seems to be a retirement hub for many people in Maryland. What kind of services are they offering in Washington County, and what are you kind of beating the drum to get for them?
For the retirement community?
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing we struggle with in the state of Maryland really is cost of living, right? I mean, we are a higher cost of living state. So you see retirees either flock to a place that the cost of living is more reasonable, like Hagerstown, right? Or you see people go to Florida, places like that, where it's cheaper for a retiree to live, right? So I think I don't know that there's anything specific that I have in mind tailored to the retired community, but I do think that all things said, I mean, they're fixed income. Anybody that's retired is on a fixed income. So that's what we have to be mindful of, is that we're not pricing people out, or especially people who have worked and lived here their entire lives, that we don't price them out, right?
And one of the amenities for retirees that's offered is the Black Rock Golf Club for many retirees. They don't need anything else. That's enough. But you do bring up a very important point, which is the cost of living. I mean, something that Mark has mentioned a number of times is that I think Maryland, we're up to like the number 5th highest cost of living state in the country. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into that. There's the level of taxation, which certainly is on the higher end on the national spectrum. The housing regulations seem to add more to the cost of the average house than, say, surrounding areas regulations add to the cost of housing. When you mentioned that, the cost of living, what are your ideas on that? Any solutions that we have? What can be done about that?
I mean, to be honest with you, that's the $1 million question, right? That's affordability is what all you hear. I mean, and really rightfully so, right? That is the number one issue that everybody's facing. I don't care where you live, what you do for a living, that's one thing we all have to deal with. I think I don't have an easy answer for you. And if I did, I'd be a lot more popular, right? Than I am.
You'd probably be the governor.
I mean, if somebody can figure that out, they deserve to be in some super high position of power, right? But I mean, there's a lot of things we can do. One of which is housing. I mean, I think a lot of it's a supply and demand issue, right? Simply said, I think why we see a lower cost of housing in some of our neighboring, across the border and things like that, there's just more supply. They're able to build them quicker. Whether that's regulation, whether that's zoning, whether that's, cost of labor. I don't know. There's a lot of contributing factors, I'm certain. But it's a supply and demand. I mean, you can look at a lot of different things, but I think at the end of the day, if you have a lot more housing market, the price of the existing housing is going to go down.
I don't know if it's still current, Matthew, but I read 2 years ago that almost 50% of the rentals in Hagerstown City are Section 8. How do you think that impacts the price of housing in Hagerstown?
I tell you, I don't think it does. And the reason I say that to you, and I don't know, I can't really speak to that statistic. I'm not sure on that. But I know that our wait list is horrendous here. I mean, the wait list for subsidized housing is, last I looked, it was like 8 years or something like that. It's insane. So I don't know that, maybe at one point in time that might have been a contributing factor to the cost, but I mean, you couldn't make enough subsidized housing right now to fill the need. You really couldn't.
Where's that coming from? Where I'm assuming the the average municipality in Maryland doesn't have an 8-year waiting period. What is happening in Hagerstown to cause that?
Well, I think simply said, I mean, you guys may have a figure off the top of your head. I don't, but we are one of the lowest income areas in the state. You know, and unfortunately, I think the further west you go, the more that number is, inflated, right? So, you go out towards Cumberland, it's even worse, right? And I think they're in the same situation when it comes to subsidized housing out there. So I think a lot of it's just a factor of, where the need is, right? And there is a lot of need here for that. And we just don't have the supply to be able to give that to everybody that needs it. Right?
Another issue that's really cropping up in Hagerstown more and more is, of course, crime and the drug problem of Hagerstown. We've done multiple shows on both subjects. Can you just encapsulate how you feel and what you think the solutions are to both the drug and the crime problems in Hagerstown and Washington County?
Again, that's a big cookie to
above the pay grade.
I will say, I mean, the drug issue, specifically opioids, it continues to be like massive issue. And again, it's just, salt in the wound here that we're right at that intersection of the interstates. I mean, we are ground zero. I mean, and that's just unfortunately geography, a lot of that.
Berkeley County, I remember it was the number one source of, I want to say, meth in production, literal production for the Mid-Atlantic was in Berkeley County, just south. Obviously, when you talk about transportation, that's going to feed into Washington County, Hagerstown, and Martinsburg has really cut down on the crime and the homelessness and the drugs. I mean, they took some very specific steps. Homeless individuals and really drug dealers, the drug trade, to have moved to places in Maryland. And that is my concern. Of course, we also have the prisons, and the prisons, there's many individuals come out of the prisons, stay locally.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and I say this often, we'll never completely get rid of these issues, as you gentlemen know. And the issue of free will is free will, right? There are some people that choose to be unhoused, right? There are some people that are just, you can't tell people where to go, what to do, right? If they're not breaking the law and you don't catch them breaking the law, there's really not a lot you can do besides to try to, offer wraparound services or do different things to try to, steer the ship, right? But I mean, free will is free will. And that, to your point, I think what we see a lot of, and this is a longer shift, right? Generational, is you see a lot of, we move problems around, right? We shuffle them because everybody wants the problem to not be in their backyard, right? So we want to shift it out to be somebody else's problem. But I don't know that we're really fixing them. I think we're just moving them.
Talking about shifting, Matt, there's been an influx of immigration into the Hagerstown area. Some of it is undocumented immigrants and some are just regular old immigrants. But either way, people are shifting some of their immigrant population to the Hagerstown region, which is already stressed out for infrastructure to help people who are in need. How do you see that impacting Hagerstown and Washington County as a whole?
I don't know that I've seen or heard anything specifically with, any of the populations, whether it's an immigrant population that's an extra drain on resources. I think if anything, the noticeable change would be if you bring in non-English speaking population. Certainly that's something we've noticed that, whereas maybe 20 years ago, you would never have really thought that there was a need for like documentation or signs or communications to go out in like Spanish or in another language. Now, as you see other populations come in that may not speak English as a first language, that's certainly a need that was not around before.
Right.
I will say, at least from the outside looking in and not being a member of one of those communities, I do see that a lot of those communities that come from another country, they seem to really support their own. I do see a lot more close-knit relationships and families in those immigrant communities. It seems like we're they sort of lift up their own, their own friend group and their own families, and try to wrap around each other. So to some degree, I'd say that at least from the outside looking in, some of those immigrant communities seem to be a little bit more successful in helping support each other.
I agree with that 100%. I mean, I grew up in New York City. Unique things that I have not seen anywhere else that I've been is the way that the communities in New York City have been divided up by ethnic group, et cetera, and the way that they lift each other up the way that you described. I mean, it actually is one of the things that has created New York City historically as the prime example of the American melting pot. And I would say my experience backs, I agree with that. It really is one of the strengths that is unique to America, that they get lifted up, through their initial group, and then they become part of the greater American culture. And it's not our only strength, but it is one of our greatest strengths. There is something in Washington County that happened, example of what we're talking about, which is an individual, an immigrant. Are you familiar with her situation and her family's situation?
Yeah, pretty intimately. I don't know if would be of benefit for me to kind of describe a little bit. At least.
Yeah, could you paraphrase the situation for our viewers? That'd be nice.
Sure. So I'll describe it as best I understand it, and if I get any part of this wrong, I apologize ahead of time. But my understanding is, that her family came here legally, as I think refugees back in like '93 from Vietnam. So she was like 12 years old when she came here with the rest of her family. Through the years, the family worked on getting their legal status here in the U.S. But my understanding is when she was 19, she stole money from an employer. So, she was in the process of getting whatever the legal citizenship documents at that time, and that put a kibosh to that, right? She went to jail, paid restitution, and because of the situation with Vietnam, they weren't accepting anybody back to Vietnam from the United States. So this is all my understanding. So then they just made a deal with immigration that once a year she had to go check in. She was in kind of a weird status where she couldn't get citizenship, but also she couldn't be deported. So it was just the agreement that she come check back in once a year, go about your life, see you next year, right? That was kind of the agreement with immigration. So fast forward, she's 44, I believe, lived here for like 32 years, 4 kids, married, her and her husband own a nail salon here in Hagerstown, and goes in for her yearly check-in with immigration, and was detained, arrested, sent out to Washington State pending deportation. So the family and the community rallied together. They raised money for her, to get a lawyer and the whole 9 yards. Ended up, I believe, like a writ of habeas corpus because she was detained without due process. So she got to come home for like a month, and then went back in for the next check-in and was detained, and they had secured deportation orders to Vietnam. So she got sent to Vietnam, like right from that check-in with immigration, after being here for over 30 years. And so, tragic situation, in my opinion. The kind of the talking point has been, focusing on like the worst of the worst. And I certainly don't see someone like Melissa as falling in that category. She'd become a community member. I mean, her kids will go to school with our kids, they're integrated in the community. I mean, pay taxes and by all accounts, good upstanding citizens. So it's a hard one, and it hits close to home for us,
So her husband is an American, right? He's a United States.
He does have a citizenship. Yes, sir.
And I'm sure he can do some kind of a visa to get her back over here. Is that correct?
That I don't know. I'm not really sure how that works, especially when someone's been deported.
Yeah, the husband and the children are both still here in Hagerstown.
Yes.
But currently Melissa's over in Vietnam. But I happen to agree with you, Matthew. I think that there should be a pathway to citizenship for people like this. I mean, she's a unique situation. She's clearly not a criminal element, and she's made a business in our community. She's a member of our community. She's been outstanding for many, many years. I know people used her crime at the age of 19. If we all got arrested and sent away for the crimes we committed when we were 19 years old, and I don't think anybody would be on this show right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that really is what's so unique, is that as the crackdown on illegal immigration that ICE and the Trump administration have been doing for the last 12 months, the focus very much has been on the removal of criminal illegal immigrants through the 287G program and other programs like it. And to me, it's just common sense that is what we want to do. But then as with everything in life, nothing is just completely black and white. I mean, there are some situations that are just unfortunate, and they come up more often than once, right? I am sure that Melissa and her family are not the only ones that have gone through this, where clearly they are what we want, in America. Like her family fits in that same category, right? So obviously it's a federal matter. It doesn't fall under state law. It's not something, I believe, that you, for example, could just submit a potential bill that would solve the situation. But it does beg the question about what to do with things like the 287G program, et cetera.
Sure. So, I mean, it's a good point and a good question. I can kind of take an informed guess, right? Based on some of the things that came up during the last legislative session. I know last legislative session, there were a few bills introduced. One particularly was like HB 1222, which tried to do a few things. And one of the things it actually had in it was the end of the 287G program for the state of Maryland. The way that it was written, at least the way that it came through the House, was that it would end that 287G program, but it would also do what I believe our local municipalities. I did watch your interview with Sheriff Jenkins, and I know I've certainly talked with our sheriff here in Washington County, and the way that they implement the 287G program is, as you guys are well aware, is if someone is arrested for a serious crime, right, and they're at that time when they're booked for their crime, they ask them a series of questions that correspond to their citizenship. And if they find that they are not here legally, then they inform ICE.
And it's important to note that it's all done at the detention center with people who have already been charged with a separate crime other than any kind of immigration law.
Right. So all that to say that in that bill last year that was introduced, it mandated that in the law, even though it ended the 287G program, it mandated that if someone was arrested for a litany of crimes, I don't have it in front of me, but, anything that you'd think of, like burglary,
rape, murder, arson, rape.
Exactly. The kind of laundry list of things that you would consider a serious crime, that they were mandated to report it to ICE if they were here illegally as part of the law. So it to me, satisfied the piece of the 287G program that our local municipalities are using it as. What the part of the 287G program that I think gets everybody's hackles up, especially down in Annapolis and in mine too, is the possibility, I will say, hopefully our local, county sheriff, Frederick County Sheriff, hopefully they're not using it in this way and wouldn't have a change of heart and decide to use it in this way. But it certainly could be used in there's I think 3 different ways that they can implement the 287G program. And one of which is actively on your, doing traffic stops, right? You could, try and figure out someone's immigration status if they're speeding, or if you, pull them over for a, broken taillight or something, right?
No, that's the second way. The third way is to actively patrol with ICE looking for different individuals. Neither one of those options does either sheriff want to do. Particularly the jailhouse model which is the lowest entry level for the ICE 287G program.
So I think at least the sentiment that I was, privy to down at the state was that, while we have some sheriffs that are using this in what I would say is in, the right spirit, right, of the 287G, there's certainly nothing to stop if someone is in that 287G program, a county from using one of those other models, right? Which then presents all sorts of problems, right? I mean, racial profiling, some of the situations you've seen other places where people are getting, brought in because they have a Chicago Bulls hat on or something.
Shouldn't people with Chicago Bulls hats be brought in?
Right,
Just
especially
wondering. But
or the New York
minds want to know.
The only thing worse is a New York Yankees hat. If they have a Yankees hat on, they should immediately be pulled over.
Stop the 287G program now. Yankee.
Oh my gosh, yes, ticket all Yankee fans, right?
I would.
I do think that you'll probably see that revisited this session. Another thing that I know a lot of delegates, I had put a version of this in and, mine got dropped because there were so many other people that put something like-minded in, was just the kind of no identification issue. We've seen this come up several times where, ICE will come, even if they have a warrant, but they'll show up and they won't have any kind of identification, any way to know that they're not just like a kidnapper, right? Plain clothes or, no badge, unmarked vehicle. And, I know if it was at like my place of work and somebody rolled up and tried to kidnap one of my coworkers and didn't identify themselves, that's going to cause chaos. Right. And so I'm certain that there will be a bill put forth to try to require ICE to at least identify themselves when they're going out and they're carrying out their job, because that's dangerous. The whole kind of just anonymous snatching of people. One of these times it's going to end really badly, and I'm really worried about that too.
Well, in ICE defense, police have been operating with unmarked cars and undercover for literally decades. It is sometimes a very effective tool in law enforcement because when the criminals see you coming, they have opportunity to do a lot of different nefarious things. So, but I agree, once they're on scene and detaining somebody, they should be very quick with identifying who they are, who they're working with, and why they're there.
A friend of mine in New York, he has a coworker where ICE came in. This is going back almost a year. It's one of the very first instances that I'm aware of. A coworker and ICE came into their workplace exactly like you just described, and they took him, and he has been deported. And there was an instance in the Midwest somewhere where ICE took someone who was a citizen, a new citizen, was an immigrant, and they took him, and he's like, I'm a citizen. And of course, they ended up letting him go after they got him to the station and did the fingerprinting, et cetera. But these are the things that I think you're referring to that are the concern. Now, as far as the more extreme things, I've looked deeply, and I have not, other than a very few isolated instances, I have not seen anything even remotely similar that would imply that it was a widespread practice with any degree of regularity. But what I have found is a lot of sensationalism. I've found videos that clearly have been edited to look a certain way, like it's clearly not a legitimate, honest home video. And I am concerned that the rhetoric or the emotions, whether you want to go so far as to call it propaganda, maybe not, but that the rhetoric is not reflective of the severity of the situation. And when you look at some of the crime benefits, how it's affected the crime statistics, say in Frederick County, where Sheriff Jenkins is, who you mentioned a few minutes ago, the crime statistics are phenomenally low. And he says, absolutely, there's more than one reason why. But one of them is because of the participation in the 287G program. Do you have a concern that perhaps the rhetoric and the intensity of how things are being discussed in Annapolis, that it's not reflective of what's really going on? Or What are your thoughts on that part of it?
Well, I don't, I won't claim to speak for everyone else, but I will speak for myself in that I do think that, the media is very sensationalized,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we get it from both directions, very sensationalized. And I will say there's a lot of common sense. There's a few, there's going to be your fringe folks on both sides of the aisle. But I think really at least for myself, what I like to see and what I want to make sure happens is that we're following due process of law. We're seeing, and I've seen several, and again, I'm sure the media cherry picks what you get to see, right? We're certainly seeing the worst cases in the news. I'm with you there on that, Ethan. We get to see the worst cases is what get the clicks, right? But we're seeing people who are here for asylum, for example. They're here, they've applied for asylum, and then they're getting, grabbed by ICE, and that process is getting interrupted, which is a process that's protected by law. Or we're getting people who are, I don't even know this is the best example, but it's one that I'm sure everybody in the state is familiar with, and that's Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Yes.
The end of the day, the court will decide if he's guilty or innocent. Not for me to say, right? But what is for my responsibility as a lawmaker, and I think all lawmakers' responsibility is to make sure that the law's followed, right? Mm-hmm. And so I do think that we need to make sure, and the most important thing is that due process of law is protected. Deport first and ask questions later. It can't be acceptable.
So, Matt, how would you respond to the critics who would say that people who have entered the country illegally and what they would say criminally are not covered under the Constitution, and there is no due process for them? How would you answer that?
I mean, I would say to you that the issue with washing your hands of that, okay, whether or not you agree with that statement, the unintended consequence of washing your hands of that is catching people in. It's like trying to what do they call when you try to catch tuna and you catch a dolphin in a tuna net, right? You're going to catch people who shouldn't be caught in that net. Mm-hmm. If you throw that kind of a net out there and you just say wanton, like, okay, well, the laws don't apply because they're not actually a U.S. citizen, so they don't get those protections that citizens do. I've heard that too. But the problem is when you do that, then you're going to catch people who do need those protections, But with that same analogy, Matthew, that happens all the time. That's fishing. And when you fish, you pull in things you're not supposed to have and you throw them back. That's the process. So the process is that ICE does their detainers. They bring people in like Ethan just said. They process them. They find out they are actually U.S. citizens who have a right to be here, and they let them go. So, I mean, it's part of the criminal justice process is to, if there's a suspect, you have your due diligence is to figure out if that person is who they claim to be. Sure. I mean, mistakes are going to happen, but when we completely, I want to see it be very responsible, because if we're going to, take somebody down to the station and, I'm sorry, we got the wrong person, that type of thing happens. It's unfortunate when it does, but it does happen. But if you say, hey, we're going to lock this person up and they're going to be locked up for a month, and it turns out, oops, we got the wrong guy, or oops, this person is a citizen or is in some kind of protected legal status that we shouldn't have, grabbed this person. Those situations are just, they're unacceptable, and to your point, mistakes can happen, but when that type of thing happens, we've got to look and say, hey, are we doing this the right way? Right. And I'm sure those tuna fishermen, they've gotten a lot better, right? When they've gotten a much better nets, you don't hear about that anymore. Maybe it's still a big problem, but I think as the years go by, they realize, hey, we got to do this better. And I think we need to do this better, to make sure that we're actually, enforcing this in the way that it's intended and not catching, the Melissas and the people out there that are not the intended targets in this sort of wide net that we're throwing out here right now.
And that is a good point, and it begs the question, because I think one thing that we can all agree on is that anytime that the Melissas of America are getting caught up in this net, that is both an injustice and it is something that hurts us as a nation. But the other side is this happening because out of necessity that there was a flood of illegal immigration that was a situation artificially created that overloaded the system. And when something is this overloaded, doing it perfect, which perfect isn't possible at any time, but doing it, even really, really well, almost can't be done because the severity, the damage, the size of the problems were allowed to grow so large that these instances have been made unavoidable by the damage that was caused previously.
Well, I think you could say that. I would say though that until we fix, like, okay, maybe to your point, to be a little bit more blunt, I'll say kind of the quiet part out loud. If whatever, there was a porous border, or a lot of people came into the country illegally that should have come here, by legal process, right? And it got out of hand, and there's a lot of people who have entered the country illegally. I think it's kind of, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's kind of what you're saying, right?
That's what I'm referring to. Yes.
Yeah. So you could say that, right? And I'm sure there's some truth to that. I would say to you though, there are a lot of things we need to fix. Like we're kind of doing the same thing we do when we approach, like, okay, how do we fix the drug issues, or how do we fix, right? We're treating kind of the problem after the fact. We're not actually treating the actual core issue, right? So if it's that the border is too porous, then that needs fixed. If it's that our real legal immigration process is way too arduous and too complicated, then we need to fix that too, right? And perhaps, the extra staffing, instead of hiring another 10,000 ICE agents, maybe we need to bolster our legal system, right? Because, even if you arrest an extra 10,000 people, the court logs, the things are going to get caught up there, right? We're all kind of talking about the same thing, but it's just, how do you go about it? I don't know if we've got the answers. You might be right. This problem, has been going on for a long time, and, maybe it's just the method of addressing it is what we don't agree on, right? But
I think that one thing that all sides agree on is that we are a country of immigration and immigrants, and that our diversity actually is our biggest strength. Mm-hmm. And we have to find a way to incorporate good people that want to come into our country. And we have to have a way where we segregate and eliminate the people coming into our country for bad reasons. I think we can all agree on that. Well, that's a great place to end, Matt. It's been a great, I apologize for my voice. I'm getting a cold, or I screamed too much at the Ravens-Patriots game last night. I can't remember which one it was. And by the way, I am a Patriots fan, just to help you out. So we were very happy. Very happy. Ravens fans, not so much. But anyway, we thank you very much, Matt, for coming on the show. You've been a great guest. We really enjoyed talking to you. I hope you enjoyed your time here.
I did. Thank you guys very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Please feel free to come back on the show anytime you like. Just communicate with Ethan. If it's, he's usually up from his nap around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Oh, I'm sorry. That was me. That's me. I'm the one napping.
Yeah, it was fantastic talking to you, Matt. And you bring up a great point, which is that, these issues, regardless of where they started, right? And who even knows where they started? Isn't that the Billy Joel song, "We Didn't Start the Fire"? But it is incumbent upon us all to deal with it as best we can. And when you're really trying to do best by the greatest number of people, it is complicated. It's not always simple. And that's why discussions like this are necessary and highly, highly valuable.
And this is how you know, Matthew, that Ethan is in fact from Long Island, because he always gets a Billy Joel reference in as often as he possibly can. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us again. We appreciate you. Hey, this has been Mid-Maryland Votes with Delegate Matthew Schindler. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we hope that you like and share this video with as many of your friends.
That wraps up our conversation with Delegate Matthew Schindler. It's a reminder that people on different sides of the aisle agree on most of what really matters. When we recognize the humanity in each other, the temperature drops and real conversations can happen. like friends, neighbors, and fellow human beings. That's what we do here on Mid-Maryland Votes. Like, follow, and share for more content like this on Facebook and YouTube.